I connected with that.
All right, so today's Learnshop is the fifth in this Learnshop series on parental empowerment and engagement in education. This has been a partnership collaboration between RELI, which is the Regional Education Learning Initiative for East Africa, and Africa Voices Dialogue, and it builds on some remarkable work that RELI is doing in the East Africa region on this topic. And what we're hoping through these Africa Voices dialogues is really to expand that work across the continent, to get additional thinking, to get an additional flow of information, connection, commitment, and to mobilize community around a topic that's very important. And so thank you to the RELI team for the opportunity for us to work together. And we are excited to see what comes out of this series. And that in essence is what today is about. So what we are doing today is threefold. We are going to be reflecting on our learnings over this past series, so over the past year of dialogues and over the past 18 months plus of on-the-ground work that RELI's been doing in the East Africa region. And for that, we'll be hearing from two incredible researchers that are have done really phenomenal work in synthesizing the information and data that's come through, and who will be sharing that back with us. And then, as always, the goal in this Africa Voices dialogue space is not to receive information only, but really to absorb it, to think about it, to sit in thinking partnership with each other, and to discuss, to go into dialogue and think and discuss together. What insights do we have? What gaps are there? What opportunities do we see? And through that engagement, spark our own sense of commitment and action, and hopefully take that back with us to wherever we are in our spaces, to implement some of the things that have come through. And then right towards the end of the session, we are going to hear from Martin Sibula from the Ugandan
Voices Dialogue. So it's an absolute delight to invite everyone to the fifth Learnshop out of a series of Learnshops that began last year in partnership with African Voices Dialogue. And as you all know, today we will be really diving deep into the treasure trove of data and insights that we've gathered from our community's past sessions. Our simple mission is that we gain a deeper understanding of our collective journey. Yeah. To pinpoint any knowledge gaps and cultivate shared wisdom through the vibrant exchange of experiences and ideas. So this is really kind of the opportunity for us to really bring together our collective knowledge and to really push ourselves forward. So in the last Learnshops that we had, we looked at what influences parental and caregiver involvement. Even what is the definition of parental empowerment and engagement. We also looked at how parents, especially those who are furthest left behind, can be best empowered to support learning. And we have even looked at the different core areas of interventions that are enhancing parental engagement. We listened to best practices around communication, collaboration, agency, capacity sharing, leveraging of community resources, as well as systems integration, and how parental engagement and empowerment could be better integrated into and supported with the system through policy dialogue and through policy and other approaches. And we finally discussed how educational policies, resources, and frameworks can be designed to provide a strong foundation for parental empowerment and engagement, and also delve into best practices for establishing inclusive structures that actively involve parents and caregivers in decision-making processes, ensuring their voices are heard and they're valued. So we've done a lot of work, and it's really amazing, I think, what has been achieved. And I think that this partnership really lives one of our really core values as RELI, which is collaboration. and the power of collaborative impact. So I really congratulate you again for a great a series of Learnshops, and I hope that this one tops it all. And it is now my pleasure to invite you all to this Learnshop, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tisha. Thank you. That.
And then as we continue with the presentation, I'll just stop my video. There we go. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Robin, for having me here. I'm happy to be part of this great discussion and this Learnshop organized by AVD and Relly. Quite exciting. Just a few clarifications regarding one or two things. I'm not professor yet, so I'll just settle with doctor for now. I know some of us here, some of us here in higher education, and sometimes we become nitpicky about those. And then just a slight correction on my title. I'm an associate research scientist at APHRC. So I just wanted to clear.
My apologies, Lucy. I accidentally muted you. I was trying to mute the background noise. So sorry.
Oh, okay. That's okay. So did you hear the part that I said, or? Okay. All right.
Yes, Lucy, we had it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So for me, I'm going to present on the qualitative side of the data or the sharings. Let me call it the sharings that have come from the past 4 Learnshops. So what I'm sharing is what I gleaned from the qualitative data or from the sharings. And of course, we are here for further discussions on the same. So this is kind of like a broad overview because I was given, I think I have 8 minutes. And as Robin says, me having been in other AVDs, time always seems to just zoom by so fast. So I just want to make sure that I stick to my 8 minutes, although I know I'll probably be just scratching the surface of this very rich discussion. And just to also put a disclaimer out there, I am sitting amongst giants in terms of parental empowerment and engagement. So we are all learning together. So these are my reflections as well as the reflections of colleagues from Zizi or Relly. So we still are learning, and we are open to feedback from what we shall share here. So Robin, I don't know if you want to be moving the slides. Thank you. So the data analysis consisted of sharings, as I mentioned, from the 4 Learnshops. And in all these Learnshops, there's been a diverse group of participants, what we would call stakeholders from all sectors, whether it's from the family level, going into the community level, global. The Learnshops have a global reach. In fact, today there's one participant I had saying that she's from Cuba, all the way in Cuba, and doing her postdoc in Germany. So all these Learnshops have been very diverse in terms of geographical representation, as well as in terms of gender, and then also the sectors that have been represented. Next, please. So in terms of the synthesis of the data, these were the 4 components that maybe I can say were kind of forming the foundation upon which I was synthesizing the sharings. But it's very interesting what ended up coming out of the data as I continued with the analysis. So there was the aspect of communication, collaboration, capacity sharing, and leveraging of resources. But as we go along, we shall see the rich kind of sharings from the participants and what eventually emerged in relation to these 4 aspects, as well as other aspects that emerged. Next, please. Next slide. So when we look at the thematic areas and trends in terms of what was emerging from the sharings, what I would glean from it, or the kind of question that I kept on asking myself is, what is the main goal of parental empowerment and engagement? So when we are looking at all these interactions and all these sharings and talking very deeply about this PEE topic, so the immediate thing would be improving learning outcomes, because we want our learners, whichever constituent is interacting with them, whether it is at the school level or it's at home or in the community. And the community, we have a variety of support systems, or we have a variety of systems, as Virginia also mentioned earlier on, looking at what is the interplay between all these constituents in terms of supporting the learners so that we can have improved learning outcomes. And the improved learning outcomes, when we think about it a little deeply also, it will be contextualized, because how does learning outcomes look like maybe for someone in Eastern Africa or in Southern Africa or in Western Africa or around the globe, different parts of the globe. So that would be considered as an immediate outcome. But then what is the long-term goal? So the long-term goal would be inclusive education, because that is what we want eventually, so that all learners, regardless of whatever unique characteristics they bring, whatever interests, whatever makeup they are as individuals, that all of them have an equal opportunity to be able to get education that is relevant for them. So when we think about defining PEE, we have to contextualize it, looking at how do we, in terms of our local environment, our national environment, our continental or regional environment, how do we define parental engagement? We can go to the next slide. So under communication, there are a lot of sharings that came out of this, but kind of what I was able to distill from all that is looking at the importance of teacher-parent relationships. There was a lot of sharings in terms of maybe sometimes these relationships being skewed, and parents coming in, some of them with baggages that they had from their school experiences, which might not have been very pleasant. So then these feeding into the relationships that these parents have with the teachers. And sometimes there's a bit of tension, a bit of conflict. So then how do these two constituents engage together? So looking into the issues of capacity building for both sides, for the teachers as well as the parents, to be able to develop what we call a positive language that is very welcoming for the parents. And not only thinking about when the parents come into the school, but then also when the school goes into the community. So it's not a situation of only waiting for the parent to come to the school, but how do you reach out to the parent into the community? Then there was also discussion about communication approaches and moving just beyond the traditional kinds of approaches where we are sending a letter home, we are sending either a newsletter or something, or making a call. But then how do we even harness technology in terms of reaching out to the parents? Then there was another issue on the conflict zones, something that we've had discussions around. just thinking about those who are in conflict zones, and how then that affects these families' engagements with the school environment. Because if it is a normal situation, there's always the thought that, okay, we are going to communicate and we expect the parent to communicate right back. But then when you look at families that are in conflict zones, you find that priority for them is, are they going to live another day? Because they are not even sure of their own physical safety. So then when the school is trying to communicate and prioritize school matters, school engagements, and so on, these families are prioritizing life for them. So this is something that seemed to have also come out of the discussion. Special needs was another one, and especially besides thinking about the special needs of the learners, but then also thinking about the special needs of the parents. So those parents who have special needs, how is the school environment welcoming for them? So looking at both aspects of the parents as well as the learners. And then also the PEE, thinking about the parent-child communication. There was a discussion, or there were discussions that in some African families, the parents do not engage the children as much. You know, if the child has done homework, they've gone to school, the parent has provided the resources, then that for some parents, this is considered enough. But then there was the discussion around, how do parents also communicate with the children, just getting to know their well-being, how are they doing, that psychosocial interaction with their children. So something for further engagement. Next slide, please. So in the context of collaboration, or thinking about the element of collaboration, looking at how is this collaboration in PEE? Is it Afrocentric? Does it have an African identity? So in those Learnshops, there was quite a bit of mention of this, making it this collaboration Afrocentric. And then also thinking about the teachers. Teachers also have challenges that they face, both on a personal level, issues of finances. So sometimes there's the expectation that the teachers are going to engage, but then they don't engage to the level that is expected because they are also dealing with their personal issues. There was the PTAs as a form of collaboration. There were those who were for it in certain areas or in certain regions. Those who, the participants, there were some participants who felt that the PTAs in their areas were doing a good job. But then on the other hand, there were those who felt that PTAs in their schools did not perform any role. They were just, it was robotic participation. So maybe that is also something for reflection. Then inclusion of children, because they do have a voice. So how are the children also included in the conversation? So sometimes we just tend to engage the parents and the other adults, but then also the importance of including the children. Then for the parents, creating agency in them, outlining their roles as parents, developing their level of trust, and then also building their capacity so that they can be able to engage a little bit more intentionally. Asset mapping was also another thing. There's always kind of this structure that it is the school, it is the teacher, it is the principal who is the ultimate decision maker. But then also recognizing that parents, in no matter whatever social class they are in, socioeconomic class they are in, that they also have something important that they are bringing to the school. And so can the learning environment open up and be receptive for what the parents are also able to bring. And then the other thing is thinking of the how. When we want to engage with the parents, it's also good to think about the how. There was one of the Learnshops where one of the speakers was sharing on the activities or the approach that they use to get the men to be more engaged in the activities or more engaged in their students' learning. And what within that culture, they found what was working within that culture that resonated with the fathers, and that really brought them together, and it provided an avenue for them to engage. Next slide, please. Then in terms of capacity sharing and capacity building, thinking about having an integrated framework. So where there is interconnectivity and interaction and collaboration between the different constituents. So thinking about the parent, starting from the parent at an individual level. So whether you think about capacity sharing or capacity building, making sure that the parent is part and parcel of the school and home partnership. Thinking about the family in terms of resilience and how can this be built so that in spite of the challenges that the family faces, they are still able to be part and parcel of the school process. For the students, how do we enhance the capacities of the students? Empower them with life skills, provide opportunities for them to engage. What are those things that we can do within the school environment in partnership with the community, in partnership with the family, to get them to engage? School events, making them relevant to them so that they can feel their part and parcel of the process. Also having support programs that also strengthen their capacities. And then community, in relation to what I had shared earlier on about collaboration, just thinking about what community means in the African context and in terms of interactions. Then also engaging the Ministry of Education officials. And I think, I can't remember her name, the lady who just spoke a little while ago, who did the opening, talking about policies and the importance of policy engagement. And I see even one of the participants who introduced herself earlier on said she's from the Ministry of Education, I think in Tanzania or Uganda, one of those. So these are the decision makers, these are the policy makers. So they are also important in terms of having them to be part and parcel of the process. Next slide. And I think probably, I don't know if this is the last one, thinking about implementation frameworks. So having a multi-sectoral support and what would be the key components of all this. So the guiding question here that I thought of is, what is the desired level of parental engagement? So even if we are contextualizing PEE, but what are the things that would guide us in this regard? So thinking about the why and thinking about the how. So the why is obviously going to be the vision, what is driving us, and then the how is, as Virginia said earlier on, thinking about the systems, thinking about the frameworks that will kind of carry us through to be able to achieve our goal of what parental engagement, empowerment and engagement looks like. So some of the components that I picked off of the discussions was looking at policies on PEE, and then social welfare supports, and this would include supports for the families, support for the teachers, the entire school environment and the constituents who interact in there. And then having skilled teachers. Sometimes we imagine that it's automatic for the teachers to know how PEE looks like, but that might not necessarily be the case. So ensuring that they are also skilled appropriately. Then having a PEE curriculum and implementing it with fidelity. We know that in the Kenyan context, the CBC has aspects of parental engagement, empowerment and engagement, but then what is the implementation level of that? And then also having intentional parents. And you can only have intentional parents if you have strengthened their capacity. And that is what I shared earlier on, looking at having capacity building in terms of communication. How do they engage with their children? How do they interact with the school? And then we also know that there are psychosocial issues or mental, can I call it, looking at mental health, given the socioeconomic environments that those of us who are in what we can categorize as developing countries, and even just so that psychosocial support is also very important, because all that will then empower the parents and give them that agency to be very intentional when they engage in PEA. And I think Robin is there. I think that's the last. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Robin.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lucy. That was incredible. And a huge synthesis of a lot of content and work and voice, and beautifully done. So thank you. Let me stop share for the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Robin. I'll just put up the slides. Just give me a minute. Oops. Just a minute. Yeah, so I'll be sharing the experiences in piloting the parental engagement framework in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Just a minute. So we'll start with sharing our common understanding on parental engagement. And one of the things that came out strongly as we're piloting this is that parental engagement is something that has been happening, but like Lucy mentioned, it's been more robotic. So in our shared understanding, we're defining this as meaningful and sustained engagement of parents across the educational life of children by parents and other caregivers. And this includes aspects like co-creation or design of the curriculum, co-development of policies and programs that are related to learning at school, engagement in school governance and resource mobilization, engaging with teachers and other co-educators, and supporting children's learning outside of the school, that is in the home and at community level. Sorry, the slides are... and some of the main outcome areas that we looked at as we're piloting the framework, co-developing and piloting this framework, is that one, we looked at having a holistic framework to parental engagement, having parental engagement approaches in really strengthened, piloted, and synthesized, but also sustained advocacy around what works in enhancing parental engagement in learning. So these were the main motivations for us as we went on the journey of co-creating this framework. So the process of developing the framework followed 3 major steps, where we had desk review, we reviewed existing literature on different parental engagement frameworks, synthesis of approaches that really members were using, about 21 really members. Then we moved into the co-creation of the framework. The Learnshops have been a major part of this process. We've drawn quite a number of insights from the previous Learnshops. That's for the first 4 Learnshops. Then the other step has been evidence building, where we pilot this framework in the 3 countries in 4 different sites with 12 schools. And most of these schools were in communities in rural areas, public schools in communities in rural areas that are categorized as low resource communities, while communities had a relatively homogeneous and had a relatively close relationship. So the context is different from the urban context, where we have communities that are almost detached from schools with less homogeneity. So here it was really rural communities that were homogeneous and had some kind of relationship with the schools. So insights from the desk review, what we found interesting here is that the approaches that were being used by different really members could be categorized under 2: community-centered approaches as well as school-centered approaches. The school-centered approaches really focus on the school communicating, the school inviting parents to come over, participate in decision-making activities, fostering teacher-parent relationship. Then the community-centered approaches had a strong perspective on the needs of the community, issues of understanding children and adolescents, issues of parenting, socio-emotional learning needs of parents, livelihood supports. Lucy talked about an issue of self-efficacy of parents being able to support their children through school. So in the community-led approaches, we saw a number of livelihood support initiatives for parents. So involvement of community structures, especially village committees, in communication about activities that are going on in the school. And also some of these approaches had community-led feeding programs. And I must say that the community-centered approaches mainly became stronger during the COVID-19 pandemic, as learning at school was not possible. So this developed further the community-centered approaches. But the model we're trying to look at is really a model that embraces both the school and community-centered approaches and integrates them, because realize that both approaches have their own strength. So further insights from the pilot show a number of barriers to parental engagement, such as limited communication with one-way communication from the school, focus on involvement and representation rather than meaningful and sustained engagement of parents. Then the intimidating school environment. In the baseline survey, a number of parents were uncomfortable with visiting the school, and some of them felt that the school was not their place because the reception they received there was not welcoming for them, especially those who had relatively low levels of education. The other was limited teacher competencies, especially when they were dealing with conflict among parents. There's an assumption that teachers are well equipped to engage with parents, but the evidence we've got from the pilot, right from the baseline and the pilot we've been conducting, it shows that teachers were struggling on what are meaningful ways of engaging with parents. And sometimes the relationship teachers had with learners were affecting their own relationship with parents. They were kind of carrying over the issues they had with learners, especially disciplinary issues, to the way they perceived some parents of these learners. Then the other thing is that for a long time, schools in rural areas have been looked at as lacking in terms of resources. As much as it's true that a number of them are working in resource-constrained environment, the issue of leveraging the other available resources in the community is something that has not been at the forefront in a number of schools that we're working in. So these were some of the key lessons we found. So in terms of defining the pillars of the draft parental engagement framework, the pillars are mainly 4, looking at collaboration, communication, and capacity sharing In collaboration, we look at establishing and maintaining beneficial relationships among parents, schools, and communities. Communication, we look at establishing and strengthening two-way communication between the home and the school. And capacity sharing is really about working with parents, schools, and communities to identify strength, apply their skills, knowledge, and attitude and practices on their responsibility to actively engage and support lifelong learning. And leveraging community resources is really about mapping and tapping into existing community resources to kind of unlock resources that have not been utilized and make them available at the school level. So insights from the pilot with regard to communication, what worked well was use of multiple communication channels that involved verbal communication through learners, telephone communication with parents, informing them about events at school, but also blending the school and community-based channels. But what we mean by community-based channels was utilizing community structures. In the pilot, we learned that in scenarios where schools worked with community channels, such as either village committees or working with parent representatives to shape messages and also mobilized parents, communication was more effective and it worked well. Then the barriers we found were barriers around language, around the adversarial relationship between parents and teachers and learners. In scenarios in schools where parents and teachers had conflict or relationship challenges, these parents did not receive information from the schools. And also in scenarios where teachers and learners had adversarial relationships, this normally came back to the parents and affected communication between the parents and the schools. Then the other was also lack of open communication between learners and parents. A number of schools were using verbal channels through learners as a communication approach to parents. So in scenarios where there was lack of an open relationship between learners and parents, this affected communication. Then the other was school leadership. Also scenarios where there was conflict between the head teachers and the teachers, these conflicts almost also affected the communication between the school and the parents. So from collaboration, one of the lessons we learned was that schools that had low levels of parental engagement also struggled with learner absenteeism and performance. So it was a continuous cycle: low parental engagement, the issues of learner absenteeism, the issues of academic performance and learner competencies, and then adversarial relationship between parents and teachers. Because in cases where learners perform poorly, the parents normally blame this on the teachers. So it was really creating a conflict between parents and the teachers. So working through community, one of the lessons also we learned around collaboration was that using community-led advocacy initiatives proved to be more effective than the school-based initiatives in focusing a positive attitude, in fostering a positive attitude among parents. When the partners tested community-based approaches where representatives of parents were used to customize messages around school activities and mobilize parents to participate in school activities, they realized that more parents were actually participating. Because initially, parents were either not receiving the messages, or those that received the messages about school-related activities did not understand why they had to participate. So by working with community structures to adapt these messages and involve them in mobilizing the parents, it increased parental participation in school activities in a number of schools that were involved in the pilot. Then Lucy had mentioned an issue of parent-teacher associations engagement being robotic. One of the lessons we learned, especially from Tanzania, was that having a multi-stakeholder structure of parent-teacher associations that had representation from community leaders, from teachers, from the school, from teachers, community leaders, and some influential people in the community. It added legitimacy to these parent-teacher associations and also enabled parents to actually listen to what these PTAs were saying. So this increased the engagement between the parent-teacher associations and also the parents with the schools. So these are some of the voices that came up in the interactions with some of the local government education staff. For capacity sharing, with respect to learning at home, there was evidence that parents were already supporting learning at home through having conversations with children about what they were learning, teaching life skills and domestic chores, making time for children to study. And then for a number of parents that were illiterate and could not help with homework, they were able to at least provide appropriate space for learning of children. And then those that were more literate were able to help with completion of homework. And then for learners with disabilities, one of the common approaches we came across was around home visits, where teacher mentors conducted home visits to follow up on learning at home, but also to provide parents with basic tips on how to support children with different kind of disabilities to learn at home. For capacity sharing, like I mentioned, parents were participated in a number of activities at school and also volunteered in a number of resource mobilization activities to improve the school environment. Then key capacity gaps identified. One was on parenting, a need for parents to learn about the learning and development needs of children, ideas and tools on how to support learning at home, and also strengthening capacity of teachers on engagement with parents, then basic knowledge on the curriculum, especially now that all the East African countries are doing competence-based curriculum, which is a change from the traditional curriculum that was being offered. Parents need some basic knowledge on the curriculum and also literacy and numeracy skills. So on leveraging community resources, one of the key lessons we found here was that mapping existing community resources, that is working with parents and school leadership, it enabled them to unlock resources that were not used in the past to improve the school environment, learner functionality, and parents' livelihood. In one of the schools in Tanzania, the relationship between the whole discussion around leveraging community resources and involving the parent-teacher associations pushed the parent-teacher association to lobby for extension of safe water to one of the girls' schools, where the girls were walking close to 3 kilometers in search for safe water. But the advocacy efforts of the parents and also the mobilization of resources among parents enabled them raise money that was used to extend water to the school premises. Then the other example was on children with disabilities who are connected to medical services for testing, for having tests on disabilities, but also on accessing devices that improve their learning functionality, such as hearing aids and others. Livelihood support is also an issue, or is also something that came up around leveraging resources, where parents, especially in the low resource areas, were supported by the schools to acquire some basic livelihood skills, like permaculture skills in Tanzania, here in partnership where the Pastoral Men's Council was working with a number of parents, but also linkages to savings and credit initiatives, both in Uganda and Tanzania, that enabled parents to have access to loans that they could borrow, money they could borrow to either support their children's education or to support their own livelihood needs at home. So we realized that for parental engagement to work, we need to have an enabling environment, and we need to have a number of factors worked on to operationalize these frameworks at school level. One is that parental empowerment and engagement needs to be recognized as an essential component of an enabling teaching and learning environment in national and school policies. Then the other is schools to adopt strategy at school level, co-developed by parents and co-educators in the communities, and also school to create structures and platforms, involvement of parents in decision-making, oversight, and social accountability. Then the other is also having making sure that the process is monitored continuously and ensuring that the different partners are fulfilling their roles. So in terms of what is missing, this is where I would like to tap into the experience of the audience to share insights on what could be missing in this framework. But some of the areas we see that we need to look at a little bit more, for example, how parents, schools, and communities can collaborate to strengthen safeguarding mechanisms for children. I think it's an area that hasn't come up strongly that would like to deliberate on more and see how it can be integrated into the framework. Thank you for listening. Your comments and questions are welcome.
Thank you, Peter. That was phenomenal, absolutely breathtaking. So let's open up for a couple of minutes just for some questions and comments. Just a little bit really on one of a number of very important topics that we know is missing in this series. So we've taken a broad lens about big overarching themes, and what we feel is necessary now is to take a deep dive into very specific issues, and this is really what came through. So special needs and parental empowerment, conflict displacement and parental empowerment in those contexts, and I heard it come up earlier today. And I think another two very important topics have come up today. The one is around AI or technology, and the other is around the training on how to engage. So really community facilitation methodologies. How do we facilitate environments that allow for deep engagement to happen? But with that, over to Martin. Thank you for joining us. Martin Sibalo is from the Ugandan Association for Disabled Children. Apologies, that slide is slightly old. And we're really, really eager to hear your thoughts on why parental empowerment and engagement, specifically around inclusion, is important.
Thank you, moderator. I am so grateful to be a part of this. And please, can you hear me?
Perfectly,
Hello?
perfectly.
Okay.
If we could see you, that would be phenomenal.
Okay, I'm so grateful to be a part of this forum, and excited to be selected as one of the key speakers on this. Okay, I come in three areas. One, as a coordinator for the pilot project of PE&E, that is parental empowerment and engagement. Two, as a person with an impairment that is visual, and three, as a parent with visual impairment. And one of the areas that I can talk about is what exists and what special needs or disability is all about, or the different impairments is all about. First of all, one thing we have to know, it is a journey which has turning points that have to be fixed for any child or a person going through or a person with an impairment has to be supported, because at one particular step, if there is a gap and not fixed, that person will stop there. For example, you'll find that as a parent, when they expect to give birth to a child. They're always excited. But when the child is born and it's discovered he or she has an impairment, that's when the questions come up. The community, the close family members, and even the mother as the center person is now pointed to for what has happened. And this gives a starting point on where to start from as a parent, because everyone doesn't know how. The common question is what happened, what caused, and that's when the cultural behaviors and thinkings come in, the myths and all that. So you'll find such parents, they're so desperate, they are in need of support, they don't know where to start from, and they're at different levels, just accepting that this is my child, whatever happened, I have to overcome it and concentrate on how best I can support this child is key. But you'll find that as players who can come into support, it's very key to draw a line before you support, because parents of children, especially with impairments, like I said, they are desperate. You will find that if you come in as maybe as a civil society organization, NGO, CBO, community based organization, if you come in with no clear markings where to start from and where to stop, you'll find that the ownership will be all thrown up to you. Because I've seen some organizations whereby they deliver maybe, for instance, a wheelchair, but the next time they go back to monitor, they will find it maybe dropped outside